All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to CAA Oregon's Contamination Reduction webinar. Again, some folks have joined us. I want to remind folks that this webinar is specific for local governments and service providers. Our producer friends and members probably won't get a lot out of today's webinar since contamination reduction funding doesn't affect them. So if you are a producer, you're welcome to hop off so that you can focus on some other things instead of this. If folks are here and want to introduce themselves in the chat so we know who's here, we'd love to see your name, where you're from, and the organization that you're representing. The chat should be open for that. As a reminder, as always, CAA is not your attorney. I'm not your attorney. Elizabeth's not your attorney. I don't think you want either of us to be your attorneys. Nothing against you, Elizabeth. But just keep that in mind. Nothing in today's webinar is legal advice, so don't take it as such. For those of you who might be new to CAA, we are a producer responsibility organization. We're the only PRO in Oregon to have an approved program plan. And our mission is to make sure that we are delivering best-in-class services for our producer members, as well as working with local governments, service providers, and the public to ensure that extended producer responsibility for packaging is implemented as it should be. You can see the states there that we are operating in, and it seems like more are added all the time. Speaking of adding folks all the time, our team here in Oregon continues to grow. It seems like not that long ago, this slide was many fewer people, but we've got a great team here in Oregon with a deep knowledge of the recycling system and how to work with folks. So this is the team here in Oregon. If you need help along the way, our team is here to help you with those. Please reach out and let us know how we can assist you. All right, I see lots of folks there in the chat. Thanks for introducing yourself. It's great to see so many folks joining us this afternoon. And with that, I will turn it over to Elizabeth to get into the meat of today's webinar.
Thank you, Alex. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join us this afternoon. As Alex mentioned, we are hosting a happy webinar here to help our community members get a more understanding of the expectations for contamination reduction program funding. And also, hopefully, we'll provide some clarity to some questions that you might be having. So in this webinar, we're going to begin with a background to the program and its funding. Next, we're going to look at the addendum that CAA recently updated. Specifically, we'll look at the 3 different schedules in the addendum. So Schedule A is the funding application. Schedule B and C outline the obligations and deliverables. And then while we're going through the consultation process for the addendum, we will be sure to gather your information so that you have access to our service provider portal for funding to to implement your activities. And then I'm sure you've heard of this one before. It's our primary funding agreement, also known as our PFA. It is required to receive funding from CAA. So if you need a PFA, please reach out to our legal partners at Miller Nash to start that process. And finally, at the end of our presentation today, we have some time set aside to answer additional questions. So today's webinar is a bit information heavy, so I just wanted to let you know we're going to try to keep it clear and move through the content thoughtfully. So let's begin with some background. As part of the RMA, DEQ has required to establish and maintain an approved contamination reduction program elements that are eligible activities for funding. And this list DEQ recently updated on August 26th. And in response to that updated list, CAA updated our addendum, which is on our website. Also, as part of The opportunity to recycle obligations, local governments and service providers must implement programs to reduce contamination, and they also must include processes to review and revise their initiatives. So let's look at how the funding for the program is set up. The program funding for contamination reduction is capped at $3 per capita per year. This is based on most recent population estimates from the Portland State University Population Research Center. The funding year for the disbursement of the funds is based on a municipal fiscal year. For example, for this current funding year, July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. And also with other reimbursement programs, local governments can designate service providers, community-based organizations, or other local governments as eligible recipients for the funding. And this designation requires that the local governments allocate specific dollar amounts or percentage splits of the funding to each of the designees. And we understand that some jurisdictions may select to keep all the funding for their own programming, while others may select to work with multiple regional partners. CAA must receive notification of the funding allocations prior to application and disbursement of funds. We understand that while you're planning your activities and budgeting for your contamination reduction plans, that some of your plans may change. So if you need to update your funding allocations, please email oregoninfo@circularaction.org. Now we're going to move on to look at some of the best practices that are suggested so you can prepare for contamination reduction application with CAA. So first, we highly recommend that a recipient of the funding has a prepared annual contamination reduction plan and a budget. Eh, some of these jurisdictions may coordinate plans across regional partnerships, and we understand that sometimes they also may include IGAs as necessary. Also, when you have a plan and a budget prepared, this allows the benefit of receiving upfront funding so you can start undertaking your planned contamination activities. And as mentioned, DEQ maintains the approved activities list for contamination reduction program elements. And this list provides the activities that are eligible for funding. So if you're planning to undertake other activities that are not on DEQ's approved list, you will need to first get approval from DEQ regional specialist for your other planned activities. And then upon approval of the other activities, DEQ will provide the applicant a contamination reduction programming request approval letter for their records. So if you have questions about your planned activities, please reach out to your DEQ regional specialist. CAA cannot approve planned activities. And then once you have your plans, a budget, and your approved activities, we ask that you email myself, Elizabeth.Galusha@Circular Action, to begin the addendum consultation. And our goal is to complete the consultation within 2 to 3 weeks. So next, once you've prepared with your plans, let's look at the first steps that we're going to take in the consultation process and also look at the addendum. So the addendum has 3 scheduled parts. There's Schedule A, B, and C. And Schedule A is the funding application. So as part of the first step of the consultation, CAA will first review the applicant's eligible funding amount, as well as the allocations, and also get an understanding of your planned activities. And then once we review that, we will then send you a pre-filled application. And then in the application, we would like you to provide us your contact information, billing contact information, and then also this is where we're going to note if you decided to do things that are on DEQ's list of approved activities or if you're going to do other. And if you select other, we do ask that you submit a copy of the letter that DEQ provides you, that you have approval for your other elements, and we want that letter submitted with your application. Additionally, on the application, we ask that you select one funding type. An applicant may request funding once a year through an addendum. There are 3 funding type options. The first option is upfront funding. This funding type helps fund for your contamination plan so you can begin undertaking activities right away. Um, the second option is reimbursement funding. So if this option is selected, CAA can create a blanket purchase order for the year that is for the total amount of the funding. And then this purchase order can be invoiced against quarterly, so 4 times a year, up to 4 times a year. And then if funding is left over at the end of the funding year, the remaining funding balance will go away. And then our third option is advanced funding. This option is for communities that are under 25,000 in population size. They make request 2 years of funding at once. Applicants requesting 2 years of advanced funding will need to have a plan for how contamination reduction programming will be sustained for over the 2 years. And in the event that the recipient of the advanced funding does not spend all the funding by the end of the funding year, they will be required to return unspent advanced funding amounts back to CAA. So once the application is fully complete, this will be submitted into the addendum as Schedule A. So now we're going to look at Schedule B. Schedule B outlines the obligations and deliverables for funding. Schedule B will be filled out by CAA. Schedule B actually references the total funding amount determined in the funding application in Schedule A. And then funding recipients must submit applications for contamination reduction programming funding no later than August 1st of the year, immediately following the year for which the funding is requested. That was a mouthful. For example, funds for the 2025 contamination reduction programming year, they must be requested by August 1st, 2026. As a friendly reminder, we're on a municipal fiscal year. And then Schedule B also references Schedule C, and Schedule C details the completion of the deliverables, and we have that outlined into Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 1 is the initial benchmarking requirements, and we require that the applicant complete the application and Phase 1 form at the beginning of the addendum process. And then for Phase 2 is the work completion requirements form. This deliverable is submitted after the contamination reduction plan has already been completed and you can evaluate your program. So let's look at the Phase 1 initial benchmarking. This form is mirrored after DEQ's list of contamination reduction elements categories, so A, B, and C. And when you complete this form, we'd like you to be able to select your planned activities by checking a box and then adding your program estimated cost for the activity, and then summarize the total cost of your program plan for the year. We request that Phase 1 form get completed per community being served. So if you're planning to implement the same programming plans across multiple communities, you can complete one Phase 1 form. However, if you're planning to implement different programming between communities, please complete and submit multiple Phase 1 forms as needed to represent your program plans. Additionally, in the Phase 1 benchmarking form, you will also see that we ask about current spending pre-program and current contamination rate. If these are known for the community, please provide the dollar amount and percentage amount respectively. If these are not known, we understand this is a new program for some communities, so we want to start with an initial benchmarking as the contamination programs begin to mature. Next, we're going to just look at the next steps in the application process. So as a friendly reminder, both the funding application and the Phase 1 benchmarking have to be completed and submitted at the same time. And if you have requested from DEQ a letter of approval for other contamination reduction activities, we want that copy of the letter to be submitted at the same time as you submit your application in Phase 1. So CA will review the submissions, and if we have questions, we will reach out. And then we will compile the application into an addendum. The addendum will then be sent to you for review from our legal partners, Miller Nash. And once you approve the addendum, Miller Nash will then circulate the addendum for final signatures via DocuSign. Meanwhile, CIA will ensure that the applicant is fully set up in the service provider portal for invoicing and billing. And then once we have a fully executed addendum contract, the applicant will receive a purchase order from CAA and you can submit an invoice into the portal for funding. So now we're gonna jump ahead. Let's assume you've already got a full executed addendum and you've completed your contamination reduction work for the year. So the final delivery is the phase 2 work completion form. This work completion report must be completed and submitted within 30 days from the end of the program period or prior to the award of the next program funding, whichever comes first. Again, we're on a fiscal funding year, so the program period ends June 30th. Similar to the phase 1 initial benchmarking form, we ask that you complete the phase 2 work completion report based on the activities performed in the communities served. So again, if planning to implement the same programming across multiple communities, you can complete one phase 2 form. And if you're planning to implement different programming between the communities, we ask that you complete and submit multiple phase 2 forms to represent your programs. So this phase 2 report, we ask that you please provide the community served, the funding amount that was used for that portion of the programming, the dates of the activities that were deployed, and also proof of the implementation. We prefer digital copies, so you can provide receipts, a timesheet of someone that you hired, cost of purchasing mailers, etc. And finally, also, we would like a summary of your findings and results in less than 500 words. All right, we're almost at the end of the presentation. So during the consultation process, like I said, we will make sure that you're all set up in the service provider portal so that we can provide the funding to you. And then, just another friendly reminder, a primary funding agreement is required before funding can be distributed. And you can start the PFA process by reaching out to our legal partners, Miller Nash at caafunding@millernash.com. And then in summary, we ask that applicants for contamination reduction funding have a plan and a budget for their activities prior to reaching out to CAA. If you have questions about your planned activities, please consult your regional DEQ specialist. CAA cannot approve activities. And then when you're ready, you may reach out to me, Elizabeth.Galusha at Circular Action, and let me know you're ready to start your consultation. And I want to thank you for your time today. We appreciate all your continued commitment to the goals of the RMA. And I will pass this back to Alex to begin our Q&A session.
Excellent. Thanks, Elizabeth. And let me stop sharing so folks can see us. Awesome. We have a couple questions. Let's start out with the first one because that's pretty easy. Angie asked if we'll be sending out the slides. No, but we do plan to post a recording of this on our website, most likely tomorrow. That'll be on circularactionalliance.org in the webinar archive section. There was another question which was answered in writing, but I think it's probably helpful to get this out as well. They asked, where can the forms that you were talking about, Elizabeth, be found?
Yeah, so once we have our initial consultation being out, checking out your allocations, and basically we will pre-fill and fill out an application for you to fill out further. So we send them to you. We don't have, I mean, we can potentially share it with you, I guess, right, Alex? But typically, it's beginning of the consultation process where we would share the application to you, and that's when you would see them.
Yeah, if there was a need to see them beforehand, I'm sure we could share those with you. Really, what it comes down to is once you're ready, reach out there to Elizabeth, and that'll get the process moving forward. Elizabeth, you must have done a great job because there are no questions. Everybody's got it. It's all solved. Problems, nothing. Everybody's good to go. Folks, there is still time to put your questions. Just click on that Q&A button there at the bottom, and you can type your questions in the chat. And we got another question that came in, which says, for compliance with contamination reduction elements of the RMA, when do plans need to be approved and or implemented? Not sure if we have the answer to that, but to stay in compliance with contamination reduction elements of the RMA, I think that might be a question that DEQ would need to answer because we don't ensure compliance with the RMA. We just are the ones that provide funding for these contamination reduction activities. And Cat Rhodes from DEQ confirmed that that would be a call to your DEQ regional specialist. Thanks, Cat. Appreciate that. So that would be where you would want to get that answer from. Reach out to your DEQ regional specialist. They're going to be super helpful along this whole process with helping you ensure that what activities you're undertaking are approved on their list or are an activity that's been approved outside of their list, and then some of those other questions there. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in, but we will hang around for, oh, there's one. Every time I just have to say there's no questions and then a question pops up. I love it. Okay, the question is, if there are funds not spent and need to go back to CAA, what is the timeline requirement? Is it 30 days after the end of the budget cycle?
We're looking at 60 days after the end of the cycle for the return of the funds.
All right. Thanks, Greg. I'll say it again. There's no questions. Oh, it didn't work this time. Oh, it did work this time. I love it. You all, I think you're just holding out on me until I say it. So the next question, does the advance funding selection limit the jurisdiction to the population number used for the first year? So I guess that would assume that your population is growing or shrinking. And would that funding be limited to that population that was originally requested?
I would think that it has to go off the only information that we have. So the funding would be based off the 2024 numbers that we currently have. And same for the next years and after that.
Yeah, so if you as a community are expecting to see a large swing in your population, maybe just do 1 year at a time. There's no other questions in the queue. All right. Well, maybe it didn't work this time. Like I mentioned, we will be posting this recording on to circularactionalliance.org, the website there. It will also be, there will be a follow-up in the Oregon newsletter that'll be coming out around the 16th of this month. And another question came in. Reimbursement option. If that is submitted once at end of budget cycle, what is the estimated time of funding coming from CAA? How long does it take us to pay?
60 days.
All right, 60 days is how long will take us to pay. Or within 60 days. Thank you, Greg. All right. we'll hang around for the next 4 minutes, but oh, another question came in. If a city wants to or needs to shift what elements they're implementing off of the approved list, do they need to notify CAA about the change in their plan? So there's a mid-year change to what the community is implementing. Do we need to know about that?
I would say we do. If you did not select that as part of your, I mean, if you're moving funding around, we probably don't need to if you've already had those particular line items approved, and it's on the list. But if it's a whole new segment, then I would think that we would need to be notified of that.
Great. I would say, especially if it's an activity that's off of DEQ's approved list, we would definitely want to make sure that that's something that's covered. So yeah, communication is always a good thing. So just, I would say, reach out to us if there's a change in plans. So then we're not surprised on the end when we get a completion report that's totally different than what you told us was going to happen up front. So yeah, I would say better to be more communicative than less on that one. All right. Well, appreciate everyone joining us today. Hopefully that did help answer many of your questions. As always, we are here to help, and you can reach out to us. Elizabeth's email is in the chat. OregonInfo@circularaction.org is also a way you can always reach out to us. And if you've been working with a different CAA person and you want to just reach out to them and ask the question, we're all willing to make sure that that email in question gets to the right person. So don't worry, just reach out and we're happy to help. Thanks again for joining us today. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of, well, at least here it's a beautiful fall day. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and your week. Thanks, everybody.